What if the biggest battle in House of the Dragon episode 3 wasn't fought with dragons? What if it was fought inside the minds of the people who believed they deserve the Iron Throne? Because by the end of episode 3, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. Every smile hides a motive, every alliance comes with a price, and every decision pushes Westeros one step closer to a war that no one will truly win. If you thought episode 2 was intense, episode 3 raises the stakes in ways that change everything. Before we begin, I want to ask you one question. Who do you believe is making the smartest move right now, Rhaenyra, Daemon, Alicent, or Aegon? Pause the video, leave your answer in the comments, and let's see whose strategy survives by the end of this breakdown. Now, let's dive into episode 3. The episode doesn't waste a single minute. Instead of opening with a massive battle, it opens with tension. The kind of tension that tells you something important is about to happen. Everyone seems calm on the surface, but beneath that calm, the entire realm is beginning to crack. That's the genius of House of the Dragon. The most dangerous moments aren't always when dragons are flying. They're when people stop trusting each other. Almost immediately, episode 3 reminds us that power changes people. Characters who once seemed confident suddenly begin questioning every decision. Others who looked weak only a few episodes ago now start showing signs that they're ready to take control. And that's exactly why this episode feels different. Nobody is standing still anymore. Everyone is moving towards something. The question is, who's moving toward victory and who's unknowingly walking into disaster? One of the most fascinating things about episode 3 is how every conversation feels like a hidden battle. No swords. No dragons. Just carefully chosen words. Think about that for a second. In Westeros, sometimes one sentence is more dangerous than an army. A single promise can start a war, a single lie can destroy a family, and one careless decision can cost an entire kingdom. That's exactly the atmosphere episode 3 creates. Every room feels dangerous. Every meeting feels like a trap. Every alliance feels temporary. Now here's something I noticed while watching. Pay close attention to the expressions on each character's face. Sometimes what they don't say is more important than what they actually say. A brief hesitation, a forced smile, a quick glance across the room. These tiny moments quietly reveal who feels confident and who secretly knows they're losing control. That's brilliant storytelling because it rewards viewers who pay attention. Before we continue, here's another question for you. If you were sitting on the small council, whose advice would you trust the most? Would you follow experience or would you trust someone bold enough to change the rules? Let me know below because episode 3 shows us that the wrong advice can change history forever. As the story continues, another theme becomes impossible to ignore. Patience. Not every character is rushing into battle. Some are waiting. Watching. Studying everyone around them. Because they understand something incredibly important. The person who moves first isn't always the person who wins. Sometimes, the greatest advantage comes from letting everyone else reveal their plans first. That's exactly why the political game feels more dangerous than the dragons themselves. Another thing episode 3 does incredibly well is raising the emotional stakes. This is no longer simply about who deserves the throne. It's about family. Loyalty. Legacy. And the painful realization that every choice now affects future generations. You can almost feel the weight resting on every character's shoulders. They're no longer making decisions only for themselves. They're shaping the future of House Targaryen, and history has shown us that when powerful families begin turning against one another, the consequences are devastating. As the episode moves forward, small disagreements slowly begin transforming into major conflicts. At first, they seem insignificant. A disagreement here, a warning there, a decision someone quietly questions, but together, those moments create an unstoppable chain reaction. That's what makes this episode so suspenseful. You know something terrible is approaching. You just don't know exactly when it will happen, and that uncertainty keeps you glued to the screen. One scene, in particular, completely changes the mood of the episode. Without giving away everything immediately, the writers remind us that dragons aren't the only source of fear in Westeros. Ambition can be just as destructive. The desire for power can push even honorable people toward dangerous choices, and once ambition takes control, turning back becomes almost impossible. By the midpoint of episode 3, the emotional pressure reaches another level. Characters begin realizing that neutrality may no longer be an option. Sooner or later, everyone will have to choose a side. And that's the terrifying part, because in a civil war, choosing any side means making enemies. As we approach the second half of this breakdown, the tension becomes even stronger. Hidden motives begin surfacing. Old loyalties are tested, unexpected conversations reveal clues about the future, and one decision quietly changes everything without most people realizing it at first. But here's the biggest question of all. Was that decision the beginning of victory, or the first step toward the downfall of House Targaryen? Because once you notice the hidden clues scattered throughout episode 3, you'll never watch it the same way again. The closer episode 3 gets to its ending, the more you realize this isn't simply another chapter in the story. It's the episode where almost every major character begins showing their true intentions. Because in Westeros, people can hide behind titles. They can hide behind loyalty. They can even hide behind family. But eventually, everyone reveals who they really are. And episode 3 is filled with those moments. Before we continue, I want you to answer another question in the comments. Who do you think has the best long-term strategy right now? Is it Rhaenyra, Daemon, Alicent, or someone quietly working behind the scenes? I'm really interested to see which character you believe is playing the smartest game. Now let's continue. One thing that stands out throughout episode 3 is how quickly the balance of power begins shifting. At the start of the episode, certain characters appear completely in control. They speak with confidence. They believe everyone is following their plan. But by the middle of the episode, small cracks begin to appear. A conversation doesn't go the way they expected. Someone questions their authority. An ally suddenly becomes unpredictable. And that's exactly how power begins to slip away. Not through one dramatic moment, but through dozens of tiny mistakes that slowly build into something impossible to stop. That's what House of the Dragon does better than almost any other series. It understands that kingdoms rarely fall overnight. They collapse one decision at a time. Another fascinating aspect of episode 3 is how carefully every character watches everyone else. Very few conversations are completely honest. Every compliment sounds calculated. Every agreement feels temporary. Every promise seems to have another meaning hidden beneath it. That's what creates the constant suspense. You never know whether someone is speaking from loyalty or simply waiting for the perfect opportunity to gain an advantage. And honestly, that uncertainty makes every scene feel dangerous. Now think about the dragons for a moment. Throughout the episode, they're always present. Sometimes they're flying across the sky. Sometimes they're resting quietly. But their presence is always felt. They're far more than powerful creatures. They represent authority, legacy, fear, and perhaps most importantly, control, because the person who controls the dragons often believes they control the future. But episode 3 quietly asks an interesting question. Can anyone truly control something that powerful forever? History suggests otherwise. Power always demands a price. Sooner or later, someone has to pay it. Now here's something I noticed that many viewers might overlook. Pay attention to how often characters hesitate before making important decisions. Those brief pauses aren't accidental. They're moments where fear and ambition collide. One part of them wants peace. The other wants victory. And those two goals rarely exist together. That's why nearly every major decision in episode 3 feels emotionally complicated. Nobody is making easy choices. Everyone is sacrificing something. Sometimes it's trust. Sometimes it's reputation. Sometimes it's family. Another thing this episode does brilliantly is showing how quickly rumors become weapons. A single piece of information can travel across the kingdom faster than any dragon. And once people begin believing those stories, it becomes almost impossible to change their minds. That's one of the hidden dangers inside Westeros. Battles aren't fought only on the battlefield. They're fought through whispers, through politics, through public opinion, through fear. Now let me ask you another question. If you lived in King's Landing during these events, whose side would you support? Would you stand beside the rightful heir, or the leader you believe could actually keep the realm united? There's no simple answer. And that's exactly why this story remains so compelling. Nobody sees themselves as the villain. Everyone believes they're protecting the future. As the episode continues, another important theme begins emerging: legacy. Every major character understands they're not simply making decisions for today. They're shaping history. They know future generations will remember what happens here. That realization creates enormous pressure. Every mistake becomes permanent. Every victory changes the future. Every betrayal leaves scars that may never heal. Now let's talk about one of the smartest storytelling techniques used throughout Episode 3, misdirection. The writers constantly encourage us to focus on one conflict, while quietly building another in the background. Just when you think you've figured out where the story is heading, a subtle conversation completely changes your perspective. Suddenly, a character you ignored earlier becomes incredibly important. Someone who looked powerful starts losing influence. Someone who appeared powerless begins quietly gaining it. Those shifts keep the audience completely invested because certainty never lasts very long. And perhaps that's the greatest strength of House of the Dragon. Every answer creates another mystery. Every victory creates another enemy. Every alliance creates another risk. As we move toward the final act of Episode 3, the atmosphere changes once again. The tension becomes heavier. The conversations become shorter. The stakes become higher. Everyone can sense that something much larger is approaching. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, very soon. The realm is moving toward a moment that will change everything. The only question is, who will be ready when that moment finally arrives? And who will realize too late that they were never truly in control to begin with? There comes a moment in every great story when the battle is no longer about swords. It's about choices, and Episode 3 reaches that moment in spectacular fashion because every conversation, every meeting, every silent glance across the room feels like another move in a game where losing could cost an entire kingdom. By now, one thing has become obvious: nobody is playing defense anymore. Everyone has started making their move. Before we continue, I want to ask you another question. Which character surprised you the most in Episode 3? Was there someone you completely underestimated, or someone who suddenly became far more dangerous than you expected? Leave your answer in the comments, because I have a feeling fans are going to have very different opinions. Now let's continue. One of the biggest strengths of Episode 3 is that it constantly changes your perspective. At first, you think one character has all the power. A few scenes later, someone else quietly takes control of the situation without drawing a single sword. That's exactly how political warfare works inside Westeros. Victory doesn't always belong to the strongest. Sometimes it belongs to the most patient. Throughout this episode, patience becomes one of the deadliest weapons. While some characters react emotionally, others simply watch. They listen, they wait for everyone else to expose their plans first. And once they understand exactly where everyone stands, that's when they strike, not with violence, with strategy. That's what makes House of the Dragon so addictive. Every episode reminds us that intelligence can be just as powerful as DRAGOFIRE. Another fascinating detail is how Episode 3 explores the burden of leadership from the outside. Sitting on the Iron Throne looks like the greatest honor imaginable, but this episode reminds us of something very different. Power brings isolation. The higher someone climbs, the fewer people they can truly trust. Every conversation becomes political. Every friendship becomes questionable. Every act of kindness makes people wonder if there's another motive hiding beneath it. Imagine living like that every single day. Never knowing who genuinely supports you, never knowing who secretly hopes you fail. That's the emotional reality facing many of the major characters. Now here's something I found incredibly interesting. Pay attention to how often characters avoid giving direct answers. Instead of saying exactly what they mean, they speak in carefully chosen phrases. Half-truths. Warnings disguised as advice. Compliments hiding criticism. That's classic Game of Thrones storytelling. The real battle isn't happening between the lines. It's happening inside them. Now let's talk about legacy once again. Every major decision in Episode 3 feels larger than the present. These characters aren't only thinking about tomorrow. They single quotes thinking about how history will remember them. Will they be remembered as wise rulers, fearless warriors, protectors of their family, or the people who accidentally destroyed everything their ancestors built? That question quietly follows nearly every important scene. Another thing Episode 3 does brilliantly is reminding us that dragons don't solve every problem. Yes, they're powerful, they're terrifying, they can change the outcome of battles, but dragons cannot create loyalty, they cannot erase betrayal, they cannot repair broken trust. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson hidden inside this episode. The greatest threats facing House Targaryen aren't always outside the castle walls. Sometimes they're sitting at the same table. Now think about the atmosphere as the episode moves toward its final act. Notice how conversations become shorter. People stop explaining themselves instead. Everyone begins acting, because eventually there comes a point where words lose their power. Only decisions matter, and once those decisions are made, there's no turning back. Before we continue, here's another question for everyone watching. If you had the power to prevent one future conflict, which decision in episode 3 would you change? Would you stop a conversation from happening, strengthen an alliance, reveal an important truth sooner, or would you leave everything exactly the way it unfolded? I'm really interested to read your theories, because one small decision could completely change the future of Westeros. Another hidden detail many viewers might overlook is how fear spreads throughout the realm, not through dragons, not through battles. Through uncertainty. People begin wondering who to trust. Who will rule? Who will betray them next? And once uncertainty spreads, even loyal allies begin questioning each other. That's exactly how kingdoms fall apart. Not from one massive defeat, but from countless moments where confidence slowly disappears. As the episode approaches its emotional climax, the tension becomes almost unbearable. You can feel that everyone is preparing for something much larger. Old rivalries grow stronger. New alliances quietly begin forming. Dangerous ambitions become impossible to hide. Every decision now feels like another piece of a puzzle that's leading toward an inevitable confrontation. The episode never needs to tell us that war is approaching. We can feel it. Every scene carries that weight. Every conversation moves the kingdom one step closer to a future nobody can fully control. And perhaps that's what makes episode 3 so unforgettable. It isn't simply building suspense for the next episode. It's showing us the exact moment when peace begins slipping away. Slowly. Quietly. Almost invisibly. Until one day everyone realizes the same terrifying truth. The realm they were trying so desperately to protect may already be beyond saving. And just when you think you've figured out who holds the advantage. Episode 3 leaves one final question hanging over Westeros: who's actually playing the game? And who's unknowingly becoming someone else's next move?